Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name's Amy, and I am part of the sales and support team here at Vigilant Software. And today I will walk you through the data flow mapping tool itself. I'll go through an actual example of this map, and we'll map out an example process that I've got. Hopefully the example process is something that would be familiar to most organisations, so you'll be able to sort of vision that and where that would fit in your own organisation and your own requirements. Now, I will ask periodically, or at the end there'll be a Q&A session. However, if you do want to drop in questions as we go through into the chat box, when we finish the webinar itself, I'll then go back to those questions, and then unless they are personal to your organisation, I can read out the question and then the answer, so everyone can get the benefit of those Q&As. So, in today's session, before we begin quickly, I hope you can all see my screen and hear me. If you can't and you're having any issues, please do drop them into the chat box or the questions just before we get properly stuck into the session this afternoon. But unless I hear of any problems, I will just get going. So this afternoon, first of all, I'll talk you through just an introduction to the data flow mapping tool, what it can do for your organisation, and how it helps. Then we'll just look at a brief case study, something that's happened quite recently and is of course relevant to this tool. Then we'll go through the user management for the data flow mapping tool. As I mentioned earlier, we will actually map out one of the processes that I have as an example, and then I'll walk you through the report, and then of course we have our Q&A session at the very end. So, to give you an introduction, our data flow mapping tool, it's hosted on our CyberComply platform, which is online cybersecurity and compliance platform. Our CyberComply hosts several of our integrated tools. So this includes our Compliance Manager, our VS Risk Cloud, our brand new DPIA, and also, of course, the data flow mapping tool. So as we're going through, I will just point out where these tools integrate with one another. Of course, we'll be focusing mainly on that data flow. There as well, we've got a definition of a data flow map. So, of course, it's a diagram of how your personal data flows through a given process, and how this is transferred from asset to asset and also location to location within your organisation. The tool is designed to simplify this process of creating your data flow maps. So, this is going to help you show your compliance of EU GDPR. It's going to allow you to have more time spent on identifying and resolving your own data protection issues. So, features of the tool. The tool enables your organisation to generate an inventory of your personal data. There's also a section in here where you can customise your own data items that are actually moving through your process. So at the end of the day, the report that you get is going to be specific to you as an organisation. You're also able to specify what the lawful basis is, and the types of personal data and the categories of the data subjects as well. The tool also creates a version-controlled data flow report that compiles all of the information from the data flow maps. It's an easy-to-read format. Also, you can export it into a Word document where you can add your own logo. You don't have to have our CyberComply logo on there. So again, it's just specifying it to you as an organisation. And also, the tool is geared for repeatability. Demonstrating your compliance to GDPR, it's not a one-time thing. You need to do this, as your organisation grows, you adapt to new processes and get new assets, and this tool really allows you to do that. So the tool is it's essential for organisations like yourselves who are on this afternoon's session, who want to embed their data protection by design and also by default into all of their processes. So like I mentioned in the previous slide, that gearing for repeatability. Also, I mentioned at the very beginning, our data flow mapping tool does integrate with our compliance manager and also our brand new DPIA tool as well. This allows you, well, the compliance manager allows you to select what security controls that you've applied to a particular process, and then you can keep track on whether this process is governed by a specific regulatory, statutory, or contractual requirements. So here are just a few points that are advisable before you actually get stuck into mapping out your processes and really making the use of that data flow mapping tool. So a few things, one way you can do this is by having meetings with the heads of your departments throughout your organization, so you can find out what every single step of your process is, who carries out each of these steps, what assets are involved, also all the interaction points between your parties, and then by doing that, you could see if there were any unforeseen or unintended users for that data. So again, it's just, covering yourselves. So now we'll just look at our case study. So we've got one that happened only in September, so very recently. You all, I'm sure, have heard of this in the news, just about the British Airways. So of course they had a massive data breach, with the effects still rippling on to now. So 2 months down the line, they're still facing the consequences of that data breach. And essentially it just, highlights how truly important it is to, one, be compliant, and also to show that you are compliant. So that's just about that. And then we'll go into our user management. So here with our user management, basically, just so you're aware, for those of you who do already have the tool, obviously you will be aware of this. For you that don't and you're looking into the tool, with the initial license, 5 users can have access to the tool. All users can access the tool simultaneously. You have different roles, which I'll walk through when we're actually in the tool. So you have organization administrator, contributor, read only, or revoked. So I'll go through what those roles entail when we're actually on the tool, but just so you're aware, you get that 5. And of course, we appreciate, large organizations, enterprise and small medium businesses as well can also use the tool. So if you need more than those 5 users, that's fine. We can build that additionally to suit your needs. So now we'll go into using the tool itself. If any of you are going through and would like to map out a process, while we're going through, or sort of just have a feel for the tool while I'm going through, now would be the time to go on to your data flow mapping tool. So now we're in the data flow mapping tool. Well, in fact, we're actually on the CyberComply dashboard. So as you can see here, we've got our 4 tools that sit on our CyberComply platform. And of course, all of these do integrate with one another. So we've got our VS Risk Cloud, of course, for those ISO 27001 risk assessments, our compliance manager, like we mentioned, for you to record what security controls you have in place and associated to particular processes. Our DPIA tool as well, and then of course that data flow mapping tool. So you can enter each of the tools by, of course, just clicking on this menu here, and also by going to either of them that you have access to. You can access them here. So we'll walk through here. If we first of all go into user details, so apologies, been signed in for a while. If we go to user details, so this is where, for any of you who are consultants, perhaps this is a key part. It allows you to work between different accounts. So as a consultant, you will be working with different clients at the same time. So you can use your same email address for this. And if this was the case, here is where you would access to different accounts. So all you'd need to do is switch your account. When you select access, it will just ask for your password, and then you'll be in that particular account that you need to be in. Then if we go to account summary, so this is where you can see your licenses that you have. So it will show you nice and clearly when your expiration date for that license is, and when you need to renew that. And then also if we go to here, this is where you can add users. So all you need to do is add the email address, and then we've got the different role statuses. So the different role statuses are, we've got organization administrator. So one of your users of the tool will be your organization administrator. Perhaps it's your, whoever's leading the project. Again, it would be whoever you as an organization, set as that role. Essentially with this, you are able to go on and edit or contribute to anything on the tool, and then also you can change the role statuses of the other users that are in your account. So that's what Organization Administrator does. Then we have Contributor. So as a contributor, you can go in, edit, and of course contribute to anything on the tool, but you can't actually go and change any of the role statuses to any of the other users. So that's that. And then the read only. Now you can have any number of read only, so they don't necessarily count as your 5 contributors or organization administrators. Just because with a read only role, you can't change anything. So you can't edit any of the maps, contribute to any of the processes, maps, anything like that. It's really good for perhaps your senior management who you need to, get involved and get on board, and also any stakeholders. Like I say, they can just go on and they can see the processes that you have mapped out, your asset register. They just can't actually edit anything on the tool, but they can it's for you to sort of show, like I mentioned, senior management or stakeholders is a key one. Then we've got revoked. So if you are working with a consultant and they've come into your organization, and they're working with you on a particular project, they then finish, they obviously leave the your site, you can just revoke their role. So they no longer have access to your account, but you don't have to delete their actual account and all the information on it. You can just simply revoke it. And like I say, you just need to add their email and then you invite here. Once you do send an invitation for Cyber Comply, after 24 hours, the link does become invalid if it hasn't been activated. So that's just worth remembering. You can, of course, resend it. But you can only resend it once in the 24-hour period. So if you are adding any of your users on, it's best to just do it at a time when you know that they're going to be able to get that email and then complete the setup of their account. So then we'll go into our settings. Now the settings section of our Cyber Comply and of course the data flow mapping tool is really where you as an organization can customize, the sort of information that is going through your your data flow maps or your processes. So essentially, when you get that report, which is the end result, and it's what you're going to demonstrate your compliance with, to make it as specific to you as an organization, essentially, this is where you do that. So we've got our classifications. These are the classifications that are associated to the records. So the records are, of course, associated to particular data items that you're moving through your process. So we've got the default classifications that, we'd find are used most frequently. However, if you as an organization do use your own classification, you can add that here, no problem. All you need to do is add another classification. And then you would type in here, and then you'd need to select save, and then once you've selected save, then when you go into the tool, it will become available for you to select it. So I'll just point that out for you when we get there. You can toggle any of these off, and you can also delete them. It's just worth noting, if you are already using any of the classifications in a data flow map, then of course if you try to delete that or toggle it off, then it will just prompt you to say that you can't because it's already being used. So we'll just delete that like so. So then we go on to custom regions. So you can see the example I've got, United States of America. So that would be the location. Say that we've declared that that's where our asset is. It's in the United States of America. Of course, massive place. So if you really want to specify whereabouts that is, we've got our custom region of California. Another example, of course, if the location was the United Kingdom, you could put your custom region as Cambridgeshire, for example. So it's all about making this report and all of the information on the tool as specific to you as an organisation as can be. So we've got the contact details here. So the contact details, to use registered address as contact address, when you go onto account summary, there's room there for you to add your organization's contact details, so your address, etc. So once you've filled it in on this section of the tool, you can then use registered address as contact details. It will then populate it here, and that's essentially saying that you, as the account that's set up on the data flow mapping tool, you are acting as the controller unless specified otherwise. So your data protection officer as well, all you need to do is add data protection officer, fill in their details there. And of course as well, if your organisation is working with a representative, depending on your processes and again your organisation, then you would just add the information there. So then we've got our personal data items. So you can see I've gone through prior to this webinar. I've actually added quite a lot just for the different demos that I've done. All of the data items that you can see here are customized ones that I have added. They're not populated in the tool. When we get into actually mapping out our process, I will show you, the default personal data items that we do have. So they're just things like your name, your address, bank card details, things that aren't necessarily specific to a particular organization. So they're already integrated into the tool. So this is more for, the specifics for you as an organization. So you can see here, it works in the same way as in you add the personal data item, you type it into this box here, and then once you save it, then it will become available later on in the tool, which I'll point out. And again, in terms of toggling an option on or off and deleting it also works in the same way. And you can add as much to this list as you need. And then we have data subjects, works in exactly the same way as our personal data items. So this is for your customized data subjects. And then we have data sources. So again, works in exactly the same way as your personal data items, data subjects, and data sources like so. So that's the sort of setup of your account and also, the settings going into mapping out your processes. I'm now going to take you into organization assets, and I'll show you how we create our asset register. If anyone does have any questions at this point, please feel free, drop them in the question box. Like I say, I'll get back to them at the end on our Q&A session. If you have something, so you don't forget it, say, if you do want to drop it in the box, and I'll make a note of when this was asked. So once you're in organization assets, you can see here, I do already have an asset register. I've gone and created most of my assets prior to this session just to sort of save time. However, I will just run through how to do it quickly. Very simple. 2 ways you can add your assets. So either you can download our Excel template, and I'll show you which one of those looks like now. And you can add in your Excel template. So this is the Excel template that you would download, and you can see that I've already entered the fields in, and we're going to add a line manager asset onto our tool. So all it asks you for is the reference. This is what it will actually be labeled as moving through the tool. And then we have the asset type. So the asset type is correlated to the icon that will be shown moving through the tool. So person, obviously you'll get that person icon, cloud, etc. Then we've got the operator, so is this a controller or is it the account if you're acting as the controller or processor, etc. And then of course where your asset is located. So these 4 fields are mandatory. If you do wish to add the description and the owner, you can do so here as well. And of course you can, however many assets are on your register or however many you want to add in at a particular time, you can just populate this, fill it all in. Then once you save that, all you need to do is drag and drop it into this middle here. And then if you import, you can see if we scroll to Line Manager, our Line Manager is here. And then I've just had a question about where to find the asset dropdown. So once you go into Data Flow Mapping tool, it automatically takes you to Organization Processes. So then if you go to this drop-down menu here, you can see Assets, and then you just have to select Organization Assets, and then that gets to that. If you have any of the other tools, like for example the VS Risk Cloud, your asset register, you can use it will be the same for both tools, so it's all about that integration. So I'll just open a couple of these, and you can see that when we select on our asset, it opens into the middle panel here. Now, just run through these quickly with you. We've got our search bar, so if you know a particular asset that you want to open into this middle panel, then you can just type it in and it'll bring it to the top for you. That's just sort of a diagram of who's owning your assets. And then if you want any hints and tips here, and then the option to open all of your assets onto this middle panel. So you can pull off a report at this stage as well. Now this report will just be of all of your assets. So, sometimes it is good as an organization to pull off a report and show that association of that particular assets with other areas of compliance and information security. So we've got some additional context tabs essentially down here. I will run through which each of these mean when we're in organization processes, just as there's a bit more context to it, but they're exactly the same. So it's just so that between each of the tools, you can easily flow between, your data flow mapping tool, the assets, the processes, and then the risk as well. So you'll see that the tool is laid out all like this. So I will go through these with you in organization processes, but the fields are the same. And it's essentially all to build out this particular report. So it just gives you a variety of the different reports that this tool can actually provide for you. Cool. So, and then obviously here you can just delete your asset, and then you can edit an asset here as well. Just a word of warning, if you do try and delete your asset and it's already being used in a process, it will tell you can't basically, just so you can't accidentally sort of mess up any of the processes that you've been working hard on. So now we'll go into processes. So going into process, you can see here, I've got 4 different process groups that I've created again as I've gone through demos, etc. I've already created the process group and process that I'll be going through the map with you. That's just to save time with my typing basically, but I will actually be going through the map completely from scratch with you, so you can see how that's all done. But when you come to organization processes, if you go to create new, first of all, it's going to ask you to create a new process group. So when you go on create new group, it will then ask you for the name of that process group, a subtitle, and a description. So what types of processes are actually going to be in under that group. And that is all dependent on you as an organization and what your requirements are. And if you want to have 1 process under the process group, if you want to have 10, again, that's all up to you as an organization, to whichever fits your requirements. So once you've entered all those fields, if you select save, it will then appear on this drop down menu straight away. So this afternoon's demonstration, we're going to go through a HR process of an employee sickness absence. So our employees not well, and it's that process of them returning to work and phoning in sick. So Once you're happy and you've created your group, you then need to create the particular process that you will actually be mapping out that data. So you select the group from the drop-down menu. You then select, and then it will ask you to enter all this detail here. So the title of your particular process, the process owner, and then what your process owner is acting as. So whether it's a controller, processor, or third party. So if you select controller, that's automatically take the contact details from the account. As I mentioned, your account, unless stated otherwise, will be seen as the controller. So just to show, obviously, if you're saying that the process owner is acting as a processor, then it will still ask for that controller's contact details. And then your representative, so that information will pull through here. And then, of course, importantly, one, to go on the report, and two, to show you're complying with GDPR. So what actually is the scope of that process? Why are you processing that personal information? What is the purpose of that? And importantly, what technical and organizational security measures do you actually have in place on that particular process? So once you've entered all that, all you need to do is select save, and then it will appear on this drop down here. So I'll walk with you through the process so you get the context. So then it will appear here once you've added all those fields, and then to open it onto the middle panel, if you just select the particular process you want, it will then appear in the middle. And then if you want to edit your process at any time, if you go onto this edit process, like so. So you can see here, just so you get a bit of background for the particular map that we'll be creating, I've got the title is HR Processes. Our HR manager is owning that particular process, and they're acting as a controller. Our scope is our absent employee calling their line manager for their return to work, and the purpose for this is to record sickness, absence of their employee for the purposes of staff deployment, salary payment, etc. So you can see there how I've built that up, so we'll just save. One key thing as well that's very useful and does save a lot of time is that you can clone a process. So for example, if your organization has particular processes that are very similar, in fact the only difference is perhaps one particular asset, maybe it's in another office that's in a different country, or a particular process is the same, but it might process one or two different actual personal data items. Rather than starting from scratch, you can just choose to clone the process. So it clones everything, all of the information you've created, the map you've created, the assets, etc. So then you've got the basis, and you can just tweak what you need to accordingly. So that's another way as well that the tool is geared for that repeatability. And of course, you can see here we've got our DPIA, so that is where we go to our new tool as well. So that's how that's integrated. Then these fields here are related risks. So for the VS risk, if you had any risk assessments on the cyber comply, you can just add a risk here, associate it. So really it's pulling off another report for all your processes. This report won't, show the particular map. It won't show the particular data items. That's at the next stage. But it does just give you a broader picture of your process to see how it's associated with other areas of, your information security within your organization. So as well, once we create our map, any of the records that we put on our map will show here. And our related assets, so any of the assets we put here as well, that will also show here once we populate our map. This is just an audit trail, so it won't be on any of the reports, but as I mentioned, there's up to 5 of you on the tool at the same time, so it just allows you to see who's going on and editing what. And then we've got the processes. So even if a process you want to show that association, but they might not particularly be under the same process group, but you can show that here, and then that will pull off in this report that you can gather. Then any related tasks, so you can assign you and any of the users on your account a particular task. You can assign them a deadline, and you can also add a link in here as well for that task. And then there's room for them to select when that's completed. And if we go to this bottom here, you can pull off a report much like the same, and it will be laid out as how you can see my screen now, and you can pull off a report on all the tasks. Then we've got related legal requirements and related controls, so that's that compliance manager side of things. And then we shall go into the data flow map, and I'll actually show you how to map out a particular process, the HR process that we've gone through. So as you can see, the first time you open your map, the user manual will appear in your screen. It's only on the first time that you open it that it will pop up. But it's always available in this corner here. It will just help. It's just good to be aware of it, really. Can answer any of those immediate questions that you might have. So then we've got export and view report, and I will show you this at the end as it makes more sense once we've actually populated all the information. Then we have the 4 middle toolbar icons here. So you'll probably live on these while you're creating your data flow map. We've got our comment tool. So you can add a comment on any of your data inputs, data subjects, assets, or data connection lines. There's also room in the comment section for you to upload any supporting documentation that might be helpful for you and as your organization, and you want to make sure is on this section of the tool. Then moving across, we've got the connection tool. So of course, this will show the connection and how your data items are flowing or being transferred between each of your assets or your data input to the first asset. Then we have the move tool. So when you drop any of your assets onto the canvas itself, you can of course move them to the location that you want to demonstrate the flow in the way that you want. Another way you can use the move tool is once you've created the map, you can manipulate your configuration of that particular map. So this is handy again for that repeatability. If you've already got your map, you just need to add something in, perhaps as a new data input or a new asset, rather than having to delete different parts of that particular map. You can just move it around. None of the connection lines break when you do this, and then of course it will just help you to build your map and view it how you wish. And then we've got our hand tool. So the hand tool essentially creates all the information or enables you to input all of the information that in turn will be populated in the report. So it's crucial, and this opens up what's called a right-hand attribute panel where you put in your lawful basis, the particular data items, etc. So then we've got our default, we've just got our zoom in, zoom out. We can delete anything we've entered on the map, we can duplicate anything, and then you can redo and undo any of the previous actions that you've done. And then if we go to this left hand side here, so we've got the option to pin this library open here. So you can see we can add a new asset. So of course you can add asset where I first showed you in organization assets. However, if you do get to this part of the tool and you need to add a new asset, that's fine, no worries, you can do so here. So you can see we've got the asset types. These are all of the asset types that are available in the organization assets as well. So all you need to do is select on that particular asset type that you wish to add. Then with your hand tool, you select the asset, it opens up your right hand attribute panel. So then as you can see here, all of the fields we've got are exactly the same as when we first created that asset in organization assets. So you just would enter the same fields and there you go, you've created your asset. So we'll just cancel this and I'll just remove this just so it doesn't get confusing. So then we've got our data input. Our data input is the point of the process, of course, where our data items actually enter that particular process. You can have multiple different data inputs in your process, as many as you need, and that is, required by that particular process. And once you make the first connection line, then you can label your data input and really specify what that is. So in this particular map that we're going to map out today, I've added 2 data inputs. So I will just drop them onto my canvas now. So you can see when I select them, they just drop straight on. I am just going to delete this that comes, when you first open the map. This will be as a default on here, but I just like to delete that at the beginning just to start completely from scratch. And then if I get my move tool again, I can move this data input below that one. And then back on the hand tool, and then we move over to this panel here again. So I don't have a data subject in this particular map. You could use this on your map when there's a point in the process when any of your data items are perhaps returned to your data subject. So for example, in a sales process, when the customer's returned to the receipt, is returned to the customer, of course it's going to have some of those data items on there. So at that point in the process, you might wish to add that and demonstrate that. You can see here as well, it's just prompted me to save. So of course it is online. If your network did have any issues, it just prompts you to save, but it's always best to do it periodically anyway. It's always up in the corner here. So you can see that will just save for me like so. And then we've got our asset library here. So this is all of the assets that we've created. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to drop them all onto the map, and then we'll start mapping out our data. So in this instance, we've got the line manager. So the line manager is the asset that we created in our organization assets with the Excel template. So you can see here I've got 2 on this particular process, so I've dropped them both onto the map. The next asset that's used in my process, so it's actually our HR team. So again, all you need to do is select it and it drops it straight onto the map. So it's very easy to start populating your map. Another asset we've got is our employee file cabinet. So again, I'll just select that and it drops it straight onto the map for me. And then I've also got payroll subsidiary. So again, we just drop that on. Now I want this payroll to be up at the top. So if I just take my move tool, I then select it and I'll drag it to where I want it to be. Then going back onto the hand tool and back onto our asset library, I can then add the attendance database. Again, with the move tool, just move it to the location that I want it to be on my map. Back to the hand tool. And then finally, our secure destruction company. So again, with that move tool, I can move that to the location I want. So once you've got all of your assets on the map, and again, of course, you can add assets onto the map at any time. It's always available in this panel here. So I'm just going to close that while we're actually on our map. Another thing you can do with the hand tool is you can just move this canvas so you can view it at the angle or the location that you want to. Then we take our connection tool. So we're going to show how these assets and data inputs are already, or how they are connected, how they're associated. When you start creating your data connection line, you can see here we've got the orange circle from the first, in this instance, data input. You then you don't drag, you simply just move your mouse to the next asset until you see the second orange circle, and then you just click your mouse and then it will create that line for you. So we'll just go ahead and do this. So you can see I've got arrows on my connection lines. This will just show me the direction that the data items are being transferred in. Also, you can see here I've got a red exclamation mark on this particular connection line. That's because I set our payroll subsidiary just to show us it was in a third country. So essentially it's just showing me that there is a transfer to a third country. I need to declare what appropriate safeguards are in place, and once I do that, that warning will go. So that was just to show you guys how that would work. So again, you can see how the arrows show the direction that data items are traveling in. And then once we actually go through and start adding the data items, that's when you'll see the numbers. So we'll just save that and then move our hand tool across. Okay, so next stage is to essentially populate the report with all of the information. So we only really need our hand tool at this stage. If we go on to the first data input, so you can see it's got that right hand attribute panel here. So then it will ask us to select that data source. So again, if you remember at the very beginning when I showed you how to add your own customized data sources, this is where you would select that if you did add any customized ones. Alternatively, we've got the default data subject here. Then you can add your reference. So in this instance, it's going to be our absent employee. And the method. So how is our personal data actually entering this particular process? In this instance, it will be our phone call. Here you can add comments as well. Like I mentioned on the comment tool, you can always also do it through here. And then we've got add data. So the data subjects, again, this is our default list that already comes populated in the tool. However, if at that settings section you add your own customized data subjects, this is where you'll be able to find those. Any customized fields you add will be automatically dropped to the bottom, so it's easy to find. You don't have to sort of filter through them. So in this instance, it's our absent employee. So now it's what actual data items are being processed. So as you can see, all of the items on this this part of the drop-down menu, they're all the default data items that come with the tool. So for in this instance, we'll use name. Now all the personalized ones that you use, they'll be straight at the bottom. So in this instance, it will be our any upcoming engagements that's being processed. It will also be the reasons for absence. So again, this is our sick employee phoning into their line manager, so giving all of that information. Any medical intervention that they might need as well. And then also the predicted period of absence. So then here we'll select what sensitive data items are being processed, if any. In this instance, we'll just do physical health. And then, of course, your lawful basis. So why are you actually able to process these personal data items? In this instance, it will be contractual necessity. So we'll select that. And then, of course, what is the exception for processing those sensitive data items? So if you do select any sensitive data items, it will ask you to declare that. And then we'll select save. And then once you're happy with that, all you need to do is apply, and then you can see our number 6 is there. Then if you take your hand tool again and you go to the asset, it will then ask you to declare how long those data items are stored on that particular asset. If you don't know, that's absolutely fine. You just declare unknown. So there is that option, but of course, to demonstrate a compliance as specifically as you can, and if you do know that storage period, it will ask you to declare that. So in this instance, I'm going to put 7 years for all of my storage, just for the purpose of this session. I know that's just the standard sort of Outlook storage period. So if I just put it on just for the purpose of this demonstration, but of course, this would be whatever is your organization requirements. So we'll select save and apply. Then if you go to the next data connection line, again, we've got the add data, so we'll select our data items. Now, as these data items are moving through as individuals, they're not associated as part of a record, which is the next data input I'll show you. You can delete any of these. So if they're not being transferred to the next asset, that's fine. You can literally delete that, and then that will again show with the number on that data connection line. So you're happy with everything else that stays the same. You select save. The method, so in this instance, from our line manager to our HR, it will be email. And then if we apply, so that's why you can see we've got our 5 as upcoming engagements was not transferred to the HR team. So then if we go to our second data input, I'll show you how to demonstrate if it's your data items are being transferred through the process on a particular record. So the same here for the data source, and we'll say data subject, and our reference is our absent employee. Then we've got the methods. So in this instance, it's face-to-face. Our absent employee has had a meeting with their line manager, and that's where our return to work form comes into play. So if we go to add data, now the data items, this is what we did in the previous data input and selected them individually. Now we're going to create a record. Simply create record. The name, so I'm going to put return to work form here, and then the classification. So again, you can see where that customized classification would come into play as well. So in this instance, we'll put put it as restricted. Then it gives you room to state what format that record is being saved in. So in this instance, I'll save physical text. And who the recipients are, so we'll just pop line manager. But of course, you would fill in these fields, to the requirements of your organisation's process. And then we've got that retention period again. So like I mentioned, I'm just going to put 7 for all of these, just for the purpose of this session. Then you create, and you can see we've got our record. How it works to associate the data items on that record is exactly the same as you found in the data items when you're specifying them individually. So our data subject, got the default, go to the bottom, we've got our customized. Personal data items, at the top we have our default, go straight to the bottom, and we've got our customized. So in this instance, it will be the name that's being processed, the reason for absence, also the GP certificate, the number of days absent, and then also they're going to give a back to work plan, like so. Sensitive data items, we'll select physical health again. And then we've got that lawful basis, so again, contractual necessity. The exception for our data items, I'm going to put it as in employment law for now. So then once you're happy, you can select save, and then that's your data, and you can also apply. And then again, you've got the number 6. Now, it is just worth noting, I've done them separately so that it's just easier for you to follow. But you can also, we've got the record here, but if you did want to show individual data items coming in on the same input, then you can do them both as well. So like so. So then we go to our line manager. So again, we've got the storage. We toggle that on. And again, I'm just going to put 7 years. And then you would save. All of this other information about the asset you've already entered when you created the asset itself. And then moving on to the next connection line. So we've got the method. So for this instance, we'll say email. And then we've got that add the data. So you just need to select that. As all of these data items are associated to a record, there isn't the option to remove any, as there was in the previous line manager connection line that I showed you. That's just because all of the items are on a record. So you wouldn't sort of erase one of those items, say, on a record. So we'll save. If the data is encrypted, you can toggle this on and add your encryption details here. So then we apply. So again, then we go to our HR team. All of the information you've already implemented into the tool. Then for your data items, so the original email, how long is that stored? That will ask you to declare that like so. And then also, because the return to work form was also transferred, you then put your known storage period here, like so. And then save. Then go in here, we can see we've got our red exclamation mark just saying that it's transferred to a third country. So then once you say what safeguards are in place and you apply that, you can see that the warning's gone. So it's just to prompt you so you don't forget anything like that. So again, we'll go to the data connection line and we'll go to the method. So in this instance, we'll put email again. And then we've got the data. So in this case, we're still going to transfer both the original email with the individual items on it and also our return to work form. And then our payroll, again, we've got the storage. So how long was each of our data items stored? So you would declare this as whatever is your own organization requirements. Like so. And then save. Then we've got our connection line again. So from our HR team to our attendance database Dropbox, we'll add the data. So in this instance, it's just our return to work form. The original email with the data items for this example doesn't actually need to be transferred. So we don't need to select that. So all we need to do is that, then we save the method. So in this instance, it would be upload. You then apply, and then you can see we've got the 6. So you can start to see how this is, this will build up, and this map can go as complex as you need it. You can have connection lines that cross over like so, if you wanted to do one from the payroll to the secure. And with the move tool, this is how you would manipulate that configuration, as I mentioned earlier. So back on the hand tool, we'll just go from the HR team to the employee file cabinet. So in this instance, the method would be, face to face. Our HR team has actually taken that record and put it in the file cabinet. So we'll add the data. Again, the original email doesn't need to be transferred at this point, so we don't need to select it. We just need to select the record that is. You then save and apply, and then we've got our 6 there. So again, we've got this warning. I've just put the secure destruction company as a third country just so that I could demonstrate that the tool does pick that up, and we'll give you a warning. And then all you need to do is say what safeguards are in place and apply, and then you can see that warning goes. And then if we add the data, so of course at this instance we've only got the return to work form to add, as the original email wasn't transferred to the file cabinet. Of course it was just the return to work form, so then that's all is available to transfer to the secure destruction company. And then the method, face to face. And then we've got our secure destruction company. So in this instance, perhaps it was unknown or there wouldn't be a storage period. You'd hope that they would, securely remove all of your information pretty straight away. And essentially, there you go. There you have it. So I have done a very simplistic map for you guys for this afternoon's session, just so we didn't spend too long. But the size of the canvas, this map can be as complex as you need it. Like I showed you, you can move it like so. Also, just to demonstrate, you can have crossover like so. You can really make this as you need it. So next I will just go through the reports with you. Now I do have one that I already exported that I will run through, but just so you're aware, to view the report, all you need to do is select this icon here, and then it will run through that report with you. It will pull off everything or the most up-to-date information that you have. Then we can export it. So how I mentioned as well, I'll show you an exported version. When you export it to a Word document, you can change the logo, so you don't necessarily have to have the cyber comply. You can have your own. So let me just show you the particular exported version, let's say, of the report. So you can see here, this is what would be exported. So like I mentioned, here you could put your own logo. So again, it's all about customizing that to you. And then it will give you that contact details. You can see here. So that's the account name is acting as the controller. So like I mentioned, that's the case unless you specify otherwise. Then you've got those contact details, your DPO's contact details, representative, etc. Then we've got an overview of the process that you've created. So everything in that organization process side of the tool, when you entered the scope, put it under the process group, all of that information is shown here in a summary. Then we've got an actual summary of the report itself, of the map, itself. So how many data items is it processing in total? Okay, you can see that it does process sensitive data items, there is cross-border processing, and there are transfers to locations outside of the EEA. Then if you wanted to view your map live in the tool, and it's obviously your account, if you select this link, it will open it up into that tool for you. But we do have an overview here. So you can see it's a slightly different map to the one we've created, but it is on the same process. It's just one I've added to on a demonstration. But then you can see we've got our personal data inventory. So we've got the summary at the beginning, and then it's got all of the data items associated to the record. So you can see them all here. And then we've got all of the other data items that aren't associated to the record, but they are going through that individual. So you can differentiate between your data items like so. So you can see as well, those specific ones that you've customized and added, you can see how important those are and why it's good to be as specific as you need and as specific to your organization, because, they all specifically show there. Then we have our asset register. So these are just all of the assets that we have in the actual tool itself, or the map that you've just created, and all of the information here. Then we've got the transfers. So with the transfers, this is for all of the data connection lines that you've added all of that information in. So you've got the method for every single data connection line, like so. You've then got that data source of those particular items, the particular items that are moving, at each stage of your process, the asset or data input that they're going from, the asset that they're being transferred to. If you had any encryption details, that would show here. If there is a third country transfer, so I'll just demonstrate there, when you did declare what your safeguards were, that's where that would show. And then you can see any of your comments that you might have here. And then from here, of course, you can export that for a PDF as well. So I'll just minimize that. We'll just save our map that we've created. And then I'll take you back to the dashboard. And essentially that is the run through of the data flow mapping tool itself. So, we've covered sort of an introduction to how this is designed to help you as an organization. Then we've gone over the user management, so how the roles differentiate and how many you're allowed, which I'm sure for most of you who do have the tool, of course you'll be aware of how many of your team do have access. But, if you do need other users to have access, please contact us and, we can sort that out. And then we've, of course, gone through the assets. So I've shown you that you can export an Excel template, add them all in, import it, have your asset register. You can also add particular assets individually as well, one by one, whichever, fits best. Then you go into organization processes. You first of all will create your process group, and then you'll create your individual process underneath that group. And then from here, you'll go and create your data flow map, how we've just gone through, like so. And then, of course, you can edit, delete your process. You can clone it, like I mentioned earlier. And then, of course, we've got these additional context fields. So just before we conclude, just to give you an example, I've opened up a couple of the processes, all in different process groups. So if you want to pull off a report here, that's not necessarily showing all of the data items, but it will show you how all of your processes are associated to, like I mentioned, other areas of your information security. You can open them up onto this middle panel. You then select on report, and then this will show you. So, imagine if you've entered in all those additional context tabs, that's where all that information would show here, like so. So we've got all of our different processes. Like so. And then that does conclude this afternoon's session. So I do hope you all found it really interesting and informative. I hope it did answer some of those initial questions that you might have on, getting started with your data flow mapping tool if you already have it, and if you don't, sort of allows you to envision how this would fit into your organization. Now there was room for a Q&A session at the end, I did mention. So what I'm going to do, leave it on the dashboard for now. I'm just going to pop myself on mute for a couple of minutes just while I read the questions that have come through. Any that aren't specific to the organisation, of course, I'll read them out before I answer, just so, for any of you that are listening to the recording, they make sense. And then, so I'll just put myself on mute just while I read those questions, and you don't get the background of my office. But if you do